As everyone's getting back to their seat, as we're about to get started, I will introduce myself. Good afternoon. My name is Karima Richardson. I'm the Associate Curator of Anthropology here at the Autry, and I'm also the Repatriation Supervisor. This has been a great first beginning to our second annual McKay Seminar. It's been moving and inspiring, and I'm hoping that we continue with that momentum as we get started with the second panel. So we're going to continue. I had to bust out the reading glasses. Oh my God. This is a first. This is a first. Okay. So we're going to continue with basketry and cultural resource management. First up is Regan Watalusi, the Agricultural Natural Resources and 4-H Extension Assistant Professor for San Juan County, see I have California brain, San Juan County, Utah State University Extension. She's a Dehe member, raised in Gallup, New Mexico. She's completed her master's degree summer 2019 and focused on studying underutilized traditional Native American food crops, including horticultural practices, genetic diversity, and its cultural importance. Her completed research encompasses various agriculture and ethnographic approaches to understanding the significance of the Southwest peach and Navajo spinach to the Navajo, Hopi, and Zuni nations. She currently works to provide extension programming in animal and plant sciences and collaborates with multiple Native American farmers to successfully propagate native food plants to encourage local sustainability within Native American communities. In addition to food restoration efforts, her extension programs offer local sustainability education opportunities in 4-H youth development programs, horticultural education, renewable energy resources, and land restoration management from extensive drought, overgrazing, and long-term conventional farming practices. Welcome, Regan.
Can you hear me clearly from here? I can adjust this. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Autry Museum. This is a remarkable opportunity. I am the oddball, I believe, in this conference a little bit, but I'll make the connection here is with the purpose of basketry making. You know, what do we do that for? Obviously, it's for our food, for our foodways. And so I've been asked to come here and speak today about the monumental research and efforts that I have carried forward just in studying a couple of traditional food crops, and I'm going to highlight the one that's been recognized on an international basis, which is the Southwest peach research. So today I'm going to share with you what this research is and the importance of it. Also collaborating and coordinating with a lot of this work has been the monumental impact of preservation of our traditional practices as Indigenous people. And so, so as we start getting into here, I wanted to kind of just highlight a lot of the reasons why I've taken an approach of looking into agriculture and who we are as Native American people. And a lot of that is our foundations of who we are as Native Americans is land management and food production. And so as we look at this, it not only is our food important just because it's what we eat, obviously we all have to eat, but it's tied into all of these different areas of focus. So it's incorporated into our ceremonialism, which is also recognized as our prayers. It's a way that we've been able to understand migration patterns, and then also historic trading routes, and then also our livelihood. So medicines, the tools that we make, everything is encompassed, and the foundation of all of this in our community is through agriculture and land management. Also the other thing that I have touched on with my research is cultural awareness. which historically has been the gap of understanding between new groups, new ethnic groups coming into the Americas, identifying Native American peoples. That cultural awareness, that cultural understanding has been absent and is still very much absent in a lot of our communities. And so us as an Indigenous people, that's what we are basically fighting for, is for people to understand who we are and why we live the way we have and why we care for our livelihood the way that we do. And in regards to that is the land management practice, as we've been discussing throughout this, this seminar. So in Dehe culture and in a lot of Native American communities, we have the medicine wheel and what this looks like to us. So for me, as an Indigenous, as a Dehe member, I didn't grow up knowing a lot of my cultural heritage. I grew up very westernized, and even though I'm half Navajo, I was very far from it. I'd be what you call a red apple. You're red on the outside, but white on the inside. That's what they used to call the Native kids that went on to boarding school. And so with this, at the beginning of every individual's understanding, we talk about your identity, who you are. And so what does that encompass? That's understanding what your lineage is. What are the practices of your ancestors, your grandparents, your parents, what do they do, and where did the gap kind of start in that line? And then the next developmental phase is where we call this the planning stage usually. And so it's more of our spiritual development and our health and well-being. And usually we start to go through this stage at a point in our lives where we are children. And so we're starting to try and find our place in society, what types of skills, who we are, what makes us. And once we've started to identify that, then we start to build a relationship for ourselves amongst our entire livelihood. So this is when we start to enter into adult life. How do we associate with our business and our community? And then also, what's our connection to the land? And so I like to share this a little bit because this is kind of where I am in my phase of life. I've had to go through my research, identifying who I am, understanding what's important about honoring your culture, your heritage, your language, anything that it is that you are empowering yourself to carry forward and to learn about. And then we go into that spiritual piece. How do we connect to this? Where do we fit into all of this? And then now that I'm at a point in my life and in my education, in my professional career, where I have understood where my foundation is, and now I'm starting to apply this information back into the community. And so that's my relationship of sharing this information back into my community. And at some point along the way, we continue to kind of bounce back and forth to the education and the language, where we're able to start teaching it and then reflect on everything. And then so we kind of go back and forth between the relationship and the worldview aspect. So this is one of the food crops that I've studied. I call this the fourth sister. I know sunflowers are very credible for being called the fourth sister also, but this plant spreads all throughout the Americas. We actually would cook it. We call it wa in Navajo. And there's archaeological evidence of this food being dried on the sandstones throughout the Southwest. And so it's a very resourceful food source with a lot of nutrition. But today we're going to talk about the peach research that I've done. And this crop has been very, I would say it's, if it's its own species, we're not sure yet, but if it is, it's been taken back in population to less than 1% of its historical of its historical numbers throughout the Southwestern Native American communities. So it's timely. The knowledge of this, even for me as Navajo, I can go to a lot of youth in our community, and I was one of them also, that they don't know that we ate peaches and that this was an abundant part of our diet. And so with this, I started to take this into breaking out the medicine wheel even into my own research. This was kind of me starting to dive in and understand, well, where are we with understanding this crop? What can we learn more about it? What do we need to protect? What's the most pertinent information that we need to know? And so I did work working with a lot of elders in 3 different tribal communities. They were interviewed, and I got a lot of information from them to be able to catalog and store to formulate the understanding of how we preserve this crop, how do we grow it, what's its requirements, and where did we even grow these? You know, what type of environment or microclimate do they need to be established in order to survive and thrive? And then we also wanted to understand doing genetic research. So you'll get to see a cladogram map today of where these genetics are with these peaches. But this is my first connection. This is my aunts and uncles here in Shanto, Arizona. My dad's furthest, holding the dog, hugging the dog. And I have here the language in these 3 tribes because these are the 3 tribal communities that have approved and are supporting my research currently today. But you'll see here on the picture on the right is that same field where my dad grew up, where they farmed. And you'll see there's no peach trees in the back, whereas the first picture, those are the peach trees that exist there. So that's, you can't find the remains today. You would never know that they existed. These are the elders that I've interviewed. Some of the pictures are really bad. I'm not a photographer. And so, but we got quite a bit of support throughout these communities, and just the knowledge that these individuals, the elders, you know, going back to the elders, learning from grandma and grandpas, your aunts, uncles, it is just so important. And so what they told me based off of what was history, and I probably should add a little bit about the background history. I don't have that piece in here, but the peaches are credited to be introduced by Spaniards in the early colonization of the Americas since prior to the 1600s. So around the time when Coronado was coming into Mexico, they were stating that they didn't see any peaches. But by 1630, there is a document by Friar de Alonso de Benavides on their exploration trek into New Mexico, going towards Santa Fe. They accounted it's the first record of abundant and vast orchards of peaches going all the way through up the Rio Grande along all the Pueblo tribes that were there. So historians today, and you'll read in a lot of literature, they will say that the Spanish introduced them. But a lot of the earlier accounts, primary references, they actually state that they were already planted and abundant and thriving upon Spanish arrival into the southwestern tribal communities. So what we found out is a lot of this with management is that they are all seed propagated. So today, fruit trees, they're grafted, but the tribal communities, there's only a few accounts of grafting, but they're very volunteer seedlings. So wherever a pit was thrown, you may see a peach tree come up there the next day. And so to horticulturalists, that is an indication of more like wild traits. Excuse me. And so as we continue to monitor them and we encourage their growth, the pruning, we don't cut back anything on these trees. We don't thin them, and a lot of that practice is a cultural no-no because you're stopping life at the beginning of its start of growing and thriving. And so we allow the trees to thin themselves. We allow the spring weather to be able to thin the blossoms off the tree as the nature nourishes and cares for them. But as far as irrigation, this picture was taken in Zuni, New Mexico. You'll notice that these orchards are carrying forward in in very remote and isolated locations. In the back, on the top north of the picture, is actually where the Zuni village is. So we're actually up at least 200 feet from the village level. And then you'll see that there's a sheer cliff on the left side of the picture. And where the picture was taken is we were standing on top of the mesa, looking down on this mesa shelf. And so it's another jump of at least 100 feet up into this area. And so these are the orchards where the Zuni Pueblo would plant their peaches. There's a red arrow there to indicate a house where it was a lookout house, also a safe house, but also if for whoever was stationed to care for and manage the orchard, that would be their place of living, and they would stay there in the orchard for fruit harvest. There's 3 arrows here to show that that's where the last few trees were left. But my late husband, was at 8 years old, he came across this orchard, and he said that there was over 20 trees when he was 8. And so that was probably in the early 2000s, before that extensive drought started to go through New Mexico. And so this is in 2015, and that's me at the bottom there. And there's only 3 fruit trees left, and they were barely hanging on. So this is the existence of what we're seeing in a lot of these historic orchards. So from here, oops, went a little too fast. We have a lot of requirements here. Basically, these trees are being recognized to be drought tolerant, and it went along with what our elders were saying too. We didn't water, maybe in the first few years of establishment, we would give them a little bit of water, a cup of water a day, just get them established. After that, we don't irrigate them. Why are they dying? Potentially because the groundwater, after they've had access to the groundwater is now recessing even deeper to where those roots cannot penetrate down. And so we're starting to receive that die off. The other thing is the cultural, the community interest. We also say that if there is no interest, if the plants feel like there's no nurturing or care, that there's no purpose for them to thrive, that they will eventually allow their life to be let go also. And so we see that sometimes with our elders, even, I don't know if any of your families have noticed, but if there's an elder that is taking care of an orchard, and they've been the one that's been actively there, but when they die, it seems like they take with them the spirits of some other things that they cared for, that were connected to them. And that's a natural thing that we see until somebody else comes in and starts renewing it and taking care of it so it continues to thrive. So that's also part of what's going on here, is the elders in our communities that were living in these orchards, were caring for these orchards, and were ensuring that their grandchildren would come down and harvest the fruit and participate in the management of these orchards, that since they've died off, there's nobody leading that initiative, and it's not being carried on. And so as part of that, the orchards are also starting to die off also. Harvest, we would take these and split them in half and dry them in the sun, and that's how we would store them, was dried. We didn't have refrigerations, right? And so our traditional way of storing and preserving our food was always drying it and storing it in cold storage areas to make sure that it would be preserved, and that there wouldn't be any outside predators coming in and taking our food resources. And so, but as I look in here, a lot of these practices just with the peaches is it's very traditional way of cooking and utilizing the foods. And that it's very similar to that of corn, beans, and squash, drying the meats, drying the Navajo spinach. It's very similar, and it groups well with all of our traditional foods. And to me, like an example of an introduced food, right, is fry bread. And so how do we utilize fry bread, and how do we cook with it now? So now, we were given oil and we fry it in the grease, and it's a big bread source. But otherwise, a lot of our traditional foods are based with cornmeal. And so this last piece here, one of the questions that I asked each and every elder was, where did we get the peaches? If it's, you may answer on the basis of Your family line could have been from grandma and grandpa. Were they the first ones that planted the orchards, or do we have any stories that go much further back? And so in each community, we started to see this trend. The Hopi, they say the Spanish brought them. There's a lot of archaeologists that go in and out of their community that will date their community because they do have the oldest living village in the United States that still continue to be inhabited there at Old Oribe on Third Mesa. And so there's a lot of outside influence that comes in and tells the community what is going on. But they do have their ceremonialism in the springtime is timed around the blossoming of the peaches. So when the peaches start blooming, they start dancing and they start their ceremonies. When the peaches stop blooming, the ceremonies stop. I was also talking with the current cultural preservation director there in Hopi about a month ago, and he says, you know, there's certain prayers that we do, and it's always evolved around the peaches. There's so many other things. So your research has got me questioning, you know, how long have we had these? And those are things that we do not change. You know, we don't add crops to those ceremonies and those prayers. We don't change those. For who knows since we've been given those prayers. And so in Zuni, there was an elder, she was 96 years old. She lived in the main village, and she says they were having their home renovated by the tribe. And they said that they were removing and redoing the floors. And she says, for the longest time that I've lived there, I didn't know that there was this doorway that went right through our floor that they went down and they went into, and it was just like the Pueblo homes. Like you see over in like Mesa Verde. And the contractors went into several rooms and they found one, and they said there were peaches down there stored. And she was 96 years old. She says, I didn't even know that there was a door down here. And they said, well, do you want us to call the archaeologist? Do you want somebody to come in? And she says, no. She says, that's our treasure. We know that's ours. We're going to keep it there. And so it's there, and they boarded it up and they laid a new floor. So there's no access to that room. But I have a story from an old woman that's lived there her whole entire life. And in Navajo, just speaking with a lot of elders in a lot of the canyon areas around Lake Powell, feeding over into Navajo Mountain and that whole region, there's been at least 3 accounts, but I've never seen any myself. People have been keeping it quiet and protected, but they're indicating that these have been found in the old Anasazi ruins in these communities. So we went and we seed collected. I said, okay, let's see what we can apply here. These are all the areas that I went and I was able to find seed from remaining orchards. And here's the genetics. So we took 20 modern accessions, which are modern peach cultivars that are being bred around the United States, in all of these other countries, and they're the foundation of the main peach breeding program across all of these areas for all the fruit trees that you can buy and grow. So this is how the accessions grouped in this cladogram. And then all of the local peaches are from Hopi, Navajo Mountain, and Canyon Dehe. And you'll see that they group not just with themselves, but even regionally. They've been existent in their own communities for a very long time, that we saw that all of these populations were very inbred. And so I asked the geneticist that I'm working with out of Clemson University, she's one of the main peach breeding geneticists in the United States, you know, what will it take for a population to become this inbred, that they group this way? And she says, well, it'll take, say you take one seed, you plant it, it's its own tree, it grows, they can self-pollinate. So you take another seed from that tree, you plant it, you do that for 6 generations, and then you can end up with an inbred population after that long. And I said, well, these peaches, they grow in communities, so what would it look like if we took out the single individual and we had them grown in communities? And she said it can, you know, average to about 50 generations at least. Now, one thing that I don't have here is that we actually did dendrochronology studies. So I found dead peach trees, we cut into them, we looked at the rings. Some of them were living 80 to 100 years old. And how they've grown is they're multi-stemmed. We don't prune them, so if a branch dies off, we cut that off, and it can grow another branch. We don't know when these were. We weren't able to cross-date them. And then a lot of them, we can't date a root system. So there was a limit in what we were able to pull together to see where we would be able to place them. So with that, we're dating these to potentially being in one area at least over 480 years ago from the start. That's how far back we've been able to go. And then right here, you'll see the blue arrows. Those are a few seeds from Hopi that were cross-pollinated, and so they fit in there. And it's really funny, I know my trees very well. The leaf curl is different. Before they were even fruiting, there were a few trees that I saw, and I said, those are gonna be different. We're gonna get the fruit, and you're gonna see they're gonna be different. And they were. They look nothing like the peaches that we have growing in these isolated communities. So here's a nutritional label, another piece to the benefits that we as a community see and how much more nutritious they are. So all of the blue arrows are areas where they are much better of a fresh fruit resource than locally grown peaches. So here's a conclusion that we have here. Just management practices, they're unique based on the tribal communities. And also the dendrochronology research coordinated with each community's indication of how they started to irrigate, when they stopped irrigating, or if they never irrigated at all. The lifespan of these can be up to 80 to 100 years. We have one tree ring that was 70 to 80 years of confirmed rings, but the bark was weathered off. And so the dendrochronologists were saying you can add at least 10 to 20 more years on that because of the long time that it was there weathering in the Southwest. And then they're significantly different because they've been isolated. They're not only isolated just within their group in the entire Southwest, but within their own communities that they've been grown in. And it's a very nutritious food source. And then we have several journal articles. We have a few more coming. I've kind of spread this out, but we've been doing work on looking at the drought tolerance, and we do have that that's been indicated. I'll let you guys go. If you want to take pictures, I'll hold here just for a minute. And so here's some information on the drought study here. We set them up in a controlled greenhouse with irrigation chambers. And so you'll see that the black line being Navajo, level is a seedling rootstock for peach grafting. And you'll see that the Navajo, they were much more, overall conclusion is they had more leaf area, they had more leaves to photosynthesize with than the level did. Their root system was actually very small and constrained in those buckets, where level filled the entire bucket. And they still recovered better and quicker than the modern day rootstock that's being used for peach production. So we took this further and we want to say, well, let's look at the root system. This is the most devastating and invasive I will ever get with these trees. This actually broke my heart to be doing this, but I thought this is going to help take off in the industry and indicate that this is very important, not only just for our communities, but it might even be a resource that would be useful for peach production in the entire United States. And so these are my major professors here, but and my littlest one's in my belly. And so we got in and we started to look at the root systems and see how they differentiate. And so you'll see that level is here on the right, Navajo is on the left, and Navajo has much thicker roots. They don't have very fibrous roots. The fibrous roots in agriculture is where you start getting all of they pull the nutrition in, they pull the water in. So the bigger the roots, the less nutrients that they're actually absorbing in that type of a root. So there's more fibers in level, they're very spread out, but you'll also notice that Navajo, they have roots that start to sink down, so they naturally start to grow. The other thing is usually fruit trees in orchards, they stop competing with turf grass roots. So once the roots hit the turf, they kind of start diving down. Navajo, they just kept going out. And so they can compete well with other crops. Currently, we're working to continue the genetic research, putting this in with the world peach genome. And then we're also looking at additional locations. So once this research started getting out on an international level, we had people from Iowa starting to reach out and say, we have peaches that look just like yours. And they've been marketing them as Indian peaches for a long time. Can we include these in your research? And so I said yes. So we have some of those right now that are growing. And we've got collaboration with several Native American growers in the Navajo communities to start putting these out. We're trying to grow them in isolated communities. Bees can travel 8 miles for pollen, so we want to make sure that they are at least 8 miles from any other peach populations in these communities, so that way we can guarantee that they are genetically pure and we can start offering the seed into and throughout the communities. So, do you guys have any questions? Is there time for questions now, or is it just thank you? Not right now. Okay, so we'll just say thank you, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions. But
Thank you, Reagan. That was extremely interesting about peaches. I think we'll all have some questions later. Next, we have Ruby Chimerica, who's from Third Mesa Village of Bakavi, located on the Hopi Reservation in Arizona. She specializes in hands-on demonstration of Hopi basket weaving and the preparation of traditional Hopi foods. The Piki bread making tradition is strongly connected to family. The stone on which the bread is baked is passed down from generation to generation. Piki is used at community celebrations and festival and dances. And Ruby's here to talk about basketways and foodways. Thank you.
Where's the stool? No Hopi, ni can the young Hopi king of Umumi Pita, no Ian Hin Puhoin, and Yan Matu Gang the Wungyama, no yep, Ayan Hin is the as among them tea gang the yep, Honwung what need pu go gang what out the what Yan Magang the Wung ka, the yep hakam over pu yasatika over yep pu Umumi Pita. I have no idea how this slide thingy works. I'm not technically savvy with all this stuff, but so yeah, I'm probably going to go all over, and I'm very emotional about this topic. I grew up really young. I lived out at Hopi most of my time. This is one of the times when I was on the river. This lady, her name is Natasha, but you'll notice I'm standing on an ammo can because she's that much taller than I am. But I grew up with a single mom, and this is in front of my godmother's house. I helped her process this because she had wrist surgery, and I didn't want her to ruin her wrist again because she's got years of life to stay with us yet. So I did a lot of this. This isn't in my yard, but it's in my godmom's yard. This is this year's harvest that I also helped with my sister and her daughter. I don't have my own farm, but I do have nephews and men that offer me these. I call them my babies, my kids. Like one of the ladies says, you know, before I came last week, my living room was full of baskets and items of corn, baskets of beans, and then my corn husk was occupying several chairs. You know, like I always say, I just live with with who I am. I don't. If you come to my home and somebody says, "You mean you didn't clean up?" and I go, "What's there to clean up?" You know, I'm living with my people, my family. I'm living, you know, how I live. But this bundle was outside. It's a bundle of beans, and the pods are still under. And this was from within this last month. You won't believe what I have been doing, but that's what I live. This is what a Hopi woman's life is if you live like that. But this fire was over a pudding for my god sister's new baby a month ago. But they chose to use my pit to make the pudding. And this is yucca plant. My grandson that's here with me today, Keith, him and his brother brought me supplies. We just got over with, this is me sitting on my bed because it's the smallest room in my home that was willed to me by my grandparents. It's a stone house yet, so I have a wood stove in there. It's cheaper for me to just hibernate because I'm a lizard and a snake clan anyway, so I'm supposed to be in hibernation, I guess. So I just technically live in my bedroom because it's cheaper for me to keep it warm. But I do have another heater in the living room. It's a whole lot bigger, but this is some of my sumac, my sivapi and my yucca that I had dyed. And these are some of the baskets that were thrown out at the recent basket dance at Hovela. This is actually, the other one was on my apricot tree outside of my home. The young lady, I guess you did meet my ex-husband. We never got legally married. I have 2 daughters with him, but we were together for 17 years. So that peach tree outside of that home, I gave it the love. But I no longer eat from it, but that's okay. My kids still eat from it, but So this one is here today. It's for sale, but so the pods came off I took the pods off the vine, and then just one cold day, I just was sitting in my bedroom. I had my basket and I just started, processing the beans that way. You can step on it and stuff, but it was that day where I said, I'm just gonna be with my babies and just be calm, because I went through a lot of stuff this past month. It was a lot of good, but it was a lot of hard work for me to have to say, I'm not gonna do something. I had to really focus. I had to tell myself, Ruby, you're gonna do this first, and then you can do something else, because there was a lot of priority for me for, I don't have a farm, like I said, and I don't have a husband. I've been a single parent most of my life, but for 20 years now, I haven't been with anyone except for focusing on my kids, my grandkids. I have 4 children, 3 are girls, 1's a son. I have 10 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren that I want to live with, and I want them to know, like in Hopi, we're not supposed to shoo our girls off. But the 3 girls that I have, I told them, I said, well, you guys have seen my life so far. I've been a single parent. You've been living the way that I think that you should live as a Hopi woman or as a girl. I want you to know your land out here, but go and do the world. And I'm gonna be here, I'll be home. This is where I'll be at, and I guarantee you're gonna wanna come home. Yeah, you guys wanna live home. I never call home the res, because I don't come from the res. I come from home. Home, that's my home. And I pray that my tribe will never be relocated like the other tribes. I can't imagine leaving my home. I was telling my grandson that being my mom, being a single parent, she got us baptized into the Mormon cult religion, whatever people call it. But you asked me anything about the 4 years of seminary I did. All I know is they say that Joseph Smith was their prophet or whatever. Because I wasn't searching to learn, I didn't retain nothing. Why do I want to keep something in my brain that I don't need? Like I tell my grandson, he goes, Grandma, do you remember driving here many moons ago? I was here. I did demonstrate the piki. I'm a person where, I don't know, people call me a troublemaker because I speak up now. Unfortunately, my first marriage was 8 years of pure physical, emotional abuse, and I got away from it. I got divorced, and then I got on this road where I wanted to really go to school, so I applied for a grant, and I did go to school momentarily in Phoenix for a year and a half. But with all the names that the young lady said that basket weavers are, I was supposed to get a certificate in accounting. So for a whole year and a half, nobody really knows how I struggled with myself and my 2 kids. I wasn't even on any food stamps or nothing. I knew nothing about that stuff at the time. People don't even know that the last quarter of my school, they didn't order payroll. And I didn't have the money to do another semester to get a certificate. So I have no certificates behind me. Not even one, but people tell me because of the way I grew up that my knowledge matters. And for a moment there, you know, because of the abuse, I felt like I was worthless, that I didn't have nothing to offer the world or the people or anything. And when my grandmother died, I took care of my grandparents for 17 years. And when my grandparents died, then I didn't know what to do, you know. Do I go back to school or do I go work or what shall I do now? And so I walked to my grandpa's peach field, to his field. It's only a mile away from the village. And I always tell people, yeah, people can call me crazy. They can call me whatever they want. But I was sitting there and I was saying, come on, all of you, my helpers, please tell me what I should do next. And I always tell people that the Sivapi and the Yucca plants, they were all waving at me. Ruby, we're right here. We're right here. And then next thing I knew, my light bulb came on, like I always tell people, and I go, that's right. I can weave. You know, everybody needs to have these items, but I collected with my grandmother, but I never really like sat down with her and told her, you know, teach me how to make it, teach me this, you know, but I guess I learned by visual learning, hands-on. So I never tell people no when they want to touch my weaving stuff. A lot of people are scared of, I guess, other people's, I mean, I know there's good and bad spiritual things, you know, but I never say no to someone that wants to, whether they're a Hopi or not. A lot of people don't want me to share some of the information, and there are certain real cultural things that I will never share with anyone, you know, other than who might really need it. But so anyway, so after that, then I got into weaving. I started collecting, I started weaving, and then about a year later, someone asked me to come to a show in Sedona. So I went to a show. I had never even thought about myself as a weaver in that sense, and really actually making money off of it. And I came to a show and someone asked me to go to another show, and then I just kept going and going. And then next thing I knew, then my whole life, it's always been about kids because of how I grew up and how I was neglected in a sense, except for by my grandparents, because they're the ones that taught me everything. I went from getting water from the springs. We live on mesas, like here's our home, and you go down into the mesas. And unfortunately, because of Peabody's coal mining, we have terraces, but no gardens. We have 7 springs that used to be full when I was young, but we have no more water down there, you guys, except for from the canyon wall. You can be lucky every day if you can get just a scoop of water to drink. That was where we lived as women and grandmothers with our kids in the terrace gardens until the boys got older. Then they were told to go to the big fields. And Hopi are known for dry farming. And unfortunately, there's a lot of us women that need corn and plants, but there's not enough farmers. So I always tell people, I said, I'm gonna go to the wall down there in Mexico and I'm gonna have a sign. Anybody wanna come home? Because all those people down there need to come home. They haven't finished the migration. We need farmers. We have a lot of land, but not enough farmers. But I know that for me, it means a lot to me because I grew up with the land, with the plants, with talking to the plants, even though people say you're crazy when you first start, when they know you. They said, like my eldest daughter says, Mom, I don't want to be like you. And I go, what do you mean you don't want to be like me? Because you're crazy. You're always going around hugging trees or talking to the plants, or you're talking to the, critters or whatever. And I said, because everybody has life. Everybody is alive. We're all alive. We're all connected, no matter what color we are, no matter where we come from. We're all connected. There's nobody that can tell me today that they don't need water. I don't care how many drinks there are out there, and you tell me that this is the best, but Hopi water is the best. We don't have any kind of impurities in there, as far as I know right now. And for me to, I know I'm going way off. There's been a lot of years, but since '95, I really started weaving. And then it became this really huge thing for me. And then I was always involved in kids, and schools would invite me to their career days saying, why do you have to move to the city to be a weaver when all your material is here out at Hopi, at home? And so I became weaving, and then I got involved because I'm adamant about teaching whatever I can to whichever kids. We have a lot of half-breeds, they call them. Even my own family, I'm gonna tell you, my grandparents are full, I believe. Maybe there's a toe there that's Irish or German or something, I don't know, but my grandparents and my parents are full Hopi. I'm full Hopi. My eldest daughter is full Hopi, but her daughter is half Hopi, a quarter Mexican, and a quarter Pima. So this granddaughter, my eldest granddaughter, she broke all the rules. At Hopi, they said, don't you ever be with a white guy or with a black African American guy. And we were all like living in this fear. So my granddaughter goes and be's with a guy named Andrew, and we love him. He's half black African American, and his mother is Irish with red flaming hair. So my two grandbabies are probably not even a quarter Hopi, which on the flip side is sad. But in Hopi, they tell you whatever your mother is, whatever clan she is, that's who you are. And to me, it's like I say, I had to get enrolled into the Hopi tribe. I believe I'm full Hopi by blood. I'm trying to be a Hopi person. Hopi isn't just a tribal name, it's a way of living and being, and trying to even to me, for me, my own self, trying to understand who I am. But this is Hopi footprint. I did river trips with kids, and this is the view that was Saturday evening at the Kiva across the village from my village. But the majority of these men down here, they want a sifter basket or they want a coiled basket. And whether these men all know why the women make the sifter baskets is because we want more beans and we want more corn. And whether the men that I can only attest to saying what I've taught my kids and my grandkids of what, okay, so I guess that's the end. I did send about 40 pictures anyway, so I guess I can't tell you like a lot of pictures where I could tell you what I was doing or whatever, but basically, I took a real break right before the COVID, so I didn't go anywhere except for last year in Mesa. I did a demonstration for food, and so today, I did bring a few items, but the basket I wove for my friends. So I just want to show you guys the basic thing of that, but I do weave, and I am going to put myself back out there to go to schools or events like this. Unfortunately, I don't have a ride anymore, but I'm in prayer about that too. So, but I do love to be with people. I love to teach. I love to, whatever I'm supposed to teach, you know, at a given place and spot, you know, that's what's going to come out, you know, because I'm trying not to shut myself in with everything like that, you know, or whatever, you know. But I don't really have that much problem with gathering stuff. But the only thing that I wanted to say was, unfortunately, we do live smack in the middle of Dehe country, as they say. But Hopi says that all of the United States, all of the world belongs to Hopi, but who knows, you know? But the migrations tell you how far our people have gone and whatnot. But the one true answer I got from this farmer was, during that time, these ladies were saying, you can't go to that field and harvest these items because that's in his field, that belongs to him. And his wife was a weaver, and she had died, and she was gone for a year. And I went to this particular guy, and I said, excuse me, Ambrose, I said, since your wife is gone and I've given it a year, can I start harvesting where she used to harvest her weaving stuff? And he looks at me and he goes, why are you asking me? That doesn't belong to me. The Creator, whoever saw you weavers, he's the one that planted all these seeds for you guys. So you go ahead and use whatever you want. Ascole, Ascole. Thank you, Autry, for inviting me again up here. Ascole.
Thank you, Ruby. The next speaker couldn't be here with us today, but he did send a recording. Thomas Kenote Jr. holds a bachelor degree in environmental policy from the University of Wisconsin and a master's degree in natural resources science and management from the University of Minnesota with an emphasis in forest ecology. Thomas is an enrolled member of the Menominee tribe, and he is also LCO Anishinaabe. He brings years of experience in tribal capacity building, climate change adaptation, natural resources management, and Indigenous sustainability. He brings an understanding of interconnectedness between Indigenous knowledge and community well-being. I need to do his slides. We don't have it.
Also, Menominee Awiak, Mishik, Natramat, Manewik, Alasana Wisman, Kasina Skew Wakian, Lamat Namane, Mishik Anishinaabe Natala, Makanan and Totem, Nahawanit. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thomas Kenote Jr. I am from Lamotte Lake in Keshena, Wisconsin, which is the biggest village on the Menominee Indian Reservation. I'm an enrolled member of the Menominee Nation, and I'm also the Kudere Anishinaabe. I'm Turtle Clan, and I'm also Crane Clan. First off, I'd like to thank Joe for inviting me here today. Also, really quickly, I'm not a scholar, nor am I a museum person. I got my undergraduate degree in environmental policy and my master's in natural resources science management with an emphasis in forest ecology from the University of Minnesota. I also grew up right on the Menominee Reservation. I have worked in our forest and in various capacities in tribal natural resource management. I used to work for our Sustainable Development Institute at the local tribal college, the College of Menominee Nation. And today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Menominee Forest, climate change, tribal forestry, and lacrosse. So to start things off, next slide, please. Here are some of the maps of my people's land. The Menominee Indians are located in the Great Lakes region. The map on the left shows the ancestral territory of the Menominee. It extends the whole western coast of Lake Michigan in Wisconsin, from the Upper Peninsula in Michigan down to the Milwaukee and Chicago areas. The original land base was 10 million acres. We have no migration story. We come from this land. We have a deep understanding of the land that we exist on today. Our language, ceremonies, activities, arts, crafts, and games have always existed in this space. Today, our reservation is about 235,000 acres, as shown on the map on the right. It is the highlighted section in red. As you can see, we still exist in our ancestral lands. The land remembers us, and we remember the land. We have a deep relationships with the relatives, also known as resources, that exist in this space, from the forests, plants, animals, soils, rocks, and all beings. Next slide, please. Menominee leaders have always thought about future generations and sustainability. During the reservation era, or when the Menominee Reservation was created in 1854, we were confined to a set piece of land like most tribal nations. Leaders like Oshkosh thought about how to keep being Menominee even though we were confined to 235,000 acres. How do we make a living but maintain our indigeneity as Indigenous folks? Oshkosh is credited with this quote, and it really stands today as the original tenet of sustained yield forestry, also known as tribal forestry. It reads, "Start with the rising sun and work toward the setting sun, but take only the mature trees, the sick trees, and the trees that have fallen. When you reach the end of the reservation, turn and cut from the setting sun to the rising sun, and the trees will last forever." Oshkosh is credited with this quote, or the stewardship ethic that guides Menominee forestry today, but also this type of thinking has always guided our decisions we make on the land. This quote effectively talks about sustainability of the ecosystem, but also how to derive an economic benefit from the forest. This guides our forest management decisions today. Next slide, please. The results of this stewardship ethic is seen directly on the land. The Menominee Reservation is over 90% forested, and that value is actually cemented within the tribal constitution. This is an aerial picture that shows the Menominee Reservation from above. You can see the reservation borders contrasted to the agricultural land on all borders of the reservation. It should be noted that the forest is not a monoculture of species. The forest is actively managed and harvested for over 26 different species of timber. Next slide, please. This stewardship ethic and blending of Indigenous knowledge and science is seen from the land. This picture further illustrates the forest stewardship ethic that Oshkosh is credited in tribal forestry. This picture is of the northern border of the reservation. You can see how the county to the north, or on your right, thinks and makes decisions about the land with lots of evidence of agriculture and land clearing. The land to the south, or on your left, is the Menominee Reservation. It is heavily forested. You can see the contrasting land management decisions. It is like looking at Western thought processes and Indigenous thought processes. I would also like to remind you folks that the Menominee Forest is and has been actively managed and harvested multiple times over since the reservation was created in the 19th century. Oshkosh's quote is directly attributed to Menominee thought and Indigenous knowledge. This idea on how to conserve or sustainably manage the forest for multi-use rather than just economic benefits. The forest is managed for timber, but also for cultural activities, hunting, fishing, Indigenous agriculture, arts, cultural crafts like black ash basket making, and lacrosse sticks. It is managed for medicinal plant harvest, food harvest, such as sugar camps in the spring and wild rice in the fall. It also needs to be said that the forest is not just left alone, but managed for all of these uses while at the same time harvested for timber for the tribe to sell off and on reservation for an economic benefit. Oshkosh was effectively saying that the tribe will engage in perpetual harvest while at the same time maintaining the forest for the community. Next slide, please. Also, just to articulate the point that the forest is not a monoculture of the same age stands, this picture shows a variety of cut timber at different sizes. Some believe that the Menominee forest is an old growth forest and wilderness, and although there are tracts of land on the res that are virgin timber and untouched, the forest system itself is not old growth. It has old growth-like characteristics, such as a variety of DBH in any given stand. There's also a massive amount of biodiversity on the reservation. If you think about it, there is essentially a continuous forest for 235,000 acres with some villages here and there. A variety of ecosystems, tree species, plants, soil types, animals from large carnivores like bears and wolves to deer, small mammals, and buffalo. We actually just reintroduced buffalo to the Menominee this past year. The sturgeon and walleye and other fish in our lakes and rivers, as well as other important species all across the reservation. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite maps of all time. You can see a lot of color here, but each color represents a different forest cover type on the Menominee reservation. The tribe manages for 26 different tree species, but not only that, they're actively managing for different ecosystem conditions. So for instance, on the east side of the map, the reds and yellows, that is mostly red pines and trees that prefer sandier soil. On the west side of the map, you can see greens, which are the hard maples and hardwoods and such. Each one of these tree cover types have different ecosystems with different types of forest plants that exist within those places. Not only that, but you also have Menominee families that have utilized these spaces for multi-generations for different reasons, from hunting to fishing to harvesting ash trees and medicinal plants for important cultural uses. Climate change will and has had a big effect on tribal nations and their lands across the US. This map shows the biodiversity of the forest. Again, the forest is not a monoculture like a red pine stand. It is a mixture of species done purposefully. Climate change has and will have an impact on Menominee. But by leaning into diversity and planning for it, utilizing Indigenous knowledge as a value and stewardship ethic, Menominee has multiple paths to move forward in climate change. For instance, we had Dutch elm disease on our reservation about 20 years ago or so. We took measures to effectively harvest our elm and save our seeds. Today, elm has returned to our forest due to active forest management with Indigenous seed keepers planting the trees. We also have just recently spotted emerald ash borer, or EAB for short, on our reservation. This is significant in that EAB, or emerald ash borer, kills and devastates ash tree populations. We have been preparing for this for over 15 years. We have plans in place that are a combination of science and Indigenous knowledge to help us combat this. Because ash trees are a culturally important species on our reservation. As you know, we use black ash for basket making, as well as, next slide please, our Pakahatuan sticks for our traditional ball game. Also known as the Creator's Game, some of you may know this game as lacrosse, as it has been coined by settlers today. Ash trees are important for this game because the wood is light and shapeable, but strong. So we make our lacrosse sticks out of ash. The ball is made of a hide wrap, usually covering some type of ball that could be hide, wood, feathers, or a combination. The stick is tied up by leather and usually wrapped with sinew as well. By utilizing our relatives, or quote-unquote resources, for our traditional arts and games, we are conducting our sacred responsibility to that relative. Our original instructions and values exist within the craft, like black ash basket making, or within the steaming and shaping of the lacrosse stick from ash wood. There are inherent values expressed, teachings learned, and power felt when we create, especially in conjunction with our lands and our languages. Indigenous folks, like the Menominee, have always existed in our spaces and lands. We have lived through climate change. by continuing to make black ash baskets or lacrosse sticks. We also recognize that we need to protect and sustainably harvest these relatives. Things such as seed keeping and protecting this relative from climate change are also part of our responsibility when we create or utilize our relatives. Overall, Indigenous resiliency is inextricably linked with climate change resiliency. It is going to take a multitude of voices and thoughts in the room to help find solutions to climate change. I urge you to not only let Indigenous voices into the room, but give them the microphone as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And our last speaker before lunch is Carrie Cannon, a member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma and is also of Oglala Lakota descent. She has a BS in wildlife biology and an MS in resource management. She began working for the Hualapai tribe of Peach Springs, Arizona 18 years ago, while she began creation of an intergenerational ethnobotany program for the Hualapai community. She is currently employed as an ethnobotanist for the Hualapai Department of Cultural Resources. She administers a number of projects promoting the intergenerational teaching of Hualapai ethnobotanical knowledge, working towards preservation, revitalization to ensure tribal ethnobotanical knowledge persists as a living practice and tradition. Thank you, Carrie.
All right. I'm going to talk very swiftly because I don't want to keep people between lunch. All right. So I'll just go ahead and give you a little bit of my background. I came to the Hualapai Reservation 18 years ago, originally as a wildlife biologist. That was my background. And I was in charge of helping manage the tribe's big game species on the reservation, including the desert bighorn sheep, the elk, and the antelope, and making recommendations to the tribal council on how many tags to issue for part of their revenue stream as they market trophy hunting to the outside world. And it was through that job that I took a greater interest in actually learning about the tribal plant knowledge. And so as time went on, I transitioned out of natural resources into cultural resources. I went back to school, did a master's in resource management with a focus on Hualapai ethnobotany as my thesis. And so I had a lot of flexibility in my first job as a wildlife biologist, and I was granted permission by the community to write a grant to create an ethnobotany program where we could formally teach the plant knowledge from the elders to the youth. And through that initial grant, we've been able to keep this program going for the last 17 years. And so a little bit about my personal background, as mentioned in the introduction. On my father's side, I'm of Kiowa ancestry. On my mother's side, I'm of Oglala Sioux ancestry. And on my mother's side, I have German ancestry. And in the photo in the upper right, those are my German relatives, and they're standing in a greenhouse in Germany. They immigrated to the United States just before World War I. And then in the lower left is my great-grandmother Spotted Wing on my Kiowa side. And she was a plant medicine person for the Kiowa people. She knew all the different plants and their various uses. So I have this plant knowledge in my ancestral lineage on both sides of my family, and I feel really blessed to do the work that I do and to be in a room full of other people that are also interested in the plants. And so just to give you some context on where I live and work, it's in the Southwest and it's in northern Arizona. And if you look on the map on the right, you see that we have 22 federally recognized tribes. And the Hualapai Indian tribe is located in northwestern Arizona. And you can see the horseshoe shape at the top left. That's the reservation. It's 1 million acres. It follows 108 miles of the western stretch of the Grand Canyon along the south rim of the Colorado River. And the Hualapai are actually affiliated with some of the tribes I heard mentioned earlier in earlier presentations, like the Ipai, the Tipai, the Kumeyaay, the Kokopah. They're in the same language family, the human language family, and they follow the course of the Colorado River. So they share that ancestral tie and lineage. And so even though the present day reservation is just 1 million acres, the ancestral land base, of course, is much larger, and it includes 7 million acres of northwestern Arizona, as shown in the map on the right. And so this is a very diverse landscape. It includes the Colorado River and many other river systems, multitudes of springs, canyonlands, foothills, mountain ranges, open valleys, and then mostly the land base is in the eastern extent of the Mojave Desert, but the southern ancestral reaches extend into the northern extent of the Sonoran Desert. And then there's places on the reservation, like in the photo on the lower right, which is Peach Springs Canyon, which is the side canyon of the Grand Canyon. And you see both desert types, as this is an ecotone. And so before I came to the reservation, there was a long history of tribal cultural revitalization. Back in the 70s and 80s, the tribal members at that time received federal funding to create bilingual curriculum on the reservation and to promote their ancestral knowledge and their heritage language. And so at that time, the teachers and the elders of the community had the forethought to create a curriculum that was based on Hualapai cultural perspectives. And so all of their materials much of them were ethnobotanical based, their curriculum materials, as well as they published books on traditional rock riding, on hunting, on cattle ranching, on the Colorado River and the river trips that the tribe does. And then when I came to the reservation in 2006, that bilingual program had ended in the 2000s. And there were a number of reasons because of lack of funding, and also Arizona legislation, the state legislation passed English only legislation, which was geared towards Spanish immigrants and Spanish speaking individuals. And it had a backlash in the tribal communities of Arizona, especially for the tribal schools that were trying to teach the heritage language. And so what I'll share today about our ethnobotany program, I have selected it to just be about as it relates to basketry. Of course, our program is much more encompassing than that, but I do want to acknowledge the elders that I've worked closely with and that have shared their knowledge generously with the tribal community and with myself, going from the upper left all the way around. Georgine Paya, the late Dolores Honga, Lucille Wadahamaji, the late Melinda Powski, the late Drake Havatone, and Frank Mapatis. And so one of the main basketry plants is the Dehe, or the sumac, redberry sumac, Rus trilobata. And this is used in this region as well. And so it has an edible berry, and that's also used and consumed. It has to be gleaned to remove all the debris and the leaves and the bark. And then we grind it on the grinding stone and we make lemonade. We have moved up in the world and now we make slushies. And as you know, the basket that is holding the berries was woven with the same plant. And so this can be gathered at various times of the year, split into 3 pieces, and then woven into baskets. And baskets of all different types and purposes. And so in the photo in the upper right, Melinda's tending one of these bushes that's been neglected. It hasn't been pruned, it hasn't been burned back. It's very overgrown and gnarly looking. And so when the bushes are being tended by the people, they're long and straight and they're perfect for weaving baskets. And then when they are left to grow wild, they don't have that basketry shape that people desire. And so there are a lot of different type of baskets and that are dictated by the names, and uses are dictated by how what they're for. And so the kathak and the kathu are the large and small burden baskets. And so those were used for carrying heavy loads of various items, sometimes agricultural items from the garden. It could be used for transporting the prickly pear fruit, for harvesting and gathering the mesquite beans and transporting them, and again for different garden items. And then also I want to bring attention to tump lines, because those are used in carrying burden baskets, and those have been woven from various plant materials like the mescal agave, the yucca, the different species of yucca, and also by cultivated cotton. And so the tump lines are woven, and this is really kind of the best way to carry a load. And if the backpacking community knew this, that like to go hiking, they would have much better posture and stronger backs. And it has been, lots of evidence has shown that this really promotes good posture, and it's a most efficient way to carry a heavy load, and it's still being used in various areas around the world. So here's some more examples of burden baskets, well, tump lines being used for burden baskets and being used for water vessels. And then just talking about the tump lines, one of the plants that produces a fiber that can be woven into tump lines is the mescal agave. This is the one that we have on the reservation, Agave utahensis, and then there's several other species throughout northwestern Arizona that also have been utilized. The manat, or the banana yucca, this is similar to what Ruby uses. She, I think, uses the narrow leaf yucca. We have many species in northern Arizona: the banana yucca, the narrow leaf yucca, the soap tree yucca, the Mojave yucca, and they all have that fibrous purpose where if you boil the leaves and pound them out, you can yield the inner fiber and you can twine and weave with them for making many items, including the tump line used in basketry. And so this is the twining process after you've yielded all the fiber. And then the godid is the winnowing basket, just used for winnowing various materials, nuts or baskets or berries. And then the guedid is the parching basket, and that's used for roasting various things like the piñon nuts. And so these baskets all were designed with the use in mind. And so there's the plant that they're made from, and then there's the plant that they're used to process. And so a parching basket has to be able to withstand the burning of hot coals as you're roasting the nuts. And so they were designed in such a way that they would withstand being burned through as they have been fire hardened. And so this is just showing some of the use of the piñon nuts, processing the piñon nuts. And then the iachavis are the seed beater baskets. And a lot of this knowledge has sort of been forgotten because with colonial influences, the northwestern Arizona region was heavily impacted by early Anglo settlers that began cattle grazing. And so many of the valleys where the tribal people would gather thousands of pounds of native grass seeds became harvested by the cattle that would come in. They would gobble up all the native seeds, and then non-native grasses began to replace the native grasses. And so the knowledge of the native seeds has been really gone to the wayside as the landscape has dramatically changed and those plants have become locally extirpated. Just to mention a few of them, there's the Indian rice grass, the plantago, the wild chia, which is a close cousin of the cultivated one that you can get at the grocery stores that's considered a superfood and loaded with nutrition. And then there's over a dozen species that I'm neglecting to mention, but these were really crucial food resources that have been kind of lost to knowledge in the sense that when archaeologists come in, they think that all the southwestern people lived off the mescal agave, which they did in part, but these plants were also harvested in great abundance. But when you go back to the landscape today, it has changed so much that there's no longer that remembrance of those plants. And the items that were once used to collect them, many of them are just in museums. And so that's how knowledge has become eroded. And then the suwa is the waterproof basket. And so this is lacquered with the piñon pitch and other ingredients to withstand leaking water. And so they say that the flavor from these is like nothing else in the world. It changes the flavor of the water in a good way. And so there's just a couple folks left in the community that still know how to lacquer these baskets to make them waterproof. And so here you gather the piñon pitch, and there's some other ingredients that are also used in the process. And then this makes the baskets waterproof. And then just to touch on a couple other things that our ethnobotany program does in collaboration, we do a lecture on the medicinal plants when they have the gathering of Native American or the Gona. We've created a digital dictionary of the tribal language. And so the tribe has about 200 fluent speakers still in the community, but many of most all of the young people are second language learners, so trying to document the knowledge. Also, we've archived the place names in the Hualapai language. We have a cultural atlas that holds 800 place names in the Hualapai language across the landscape. And many of those place names say something about the landscape, like the plants that grow there, the plants that were harvested there. And so we have archived that. We've also, this is where I met Ruby about, however many years ago, 10 years ago, at the Native Food and Basketry Festival down in Tucson. And so it's great to see her here again. We met this morning in the elevator. And then we also, through our Ethnobotany program, we host a Native Food Symposium biannually, and we invite other Native presenters from throughout Indian country to share about the respective projects that they're doing in their local communities as a way to gain inspiration and continue the work that we do. And so I would love to network with those of you in the room, because I would love to get some presenters that are here to host or to be present at our next Native Food Symposium. And then we also, our symposium is similar to this. We have lectures one of the days, and then the following day we do hands-on demonstrations working with the traditional foods. And then just recently, through the support of the tribal community, I was able to get the first ever Native Plant Society chapter in Arizona that's on an Indian reservation. And so we started just this past January, so we're almost a year old, and we have Native Plant Society chapter on the reservation, and we have monthly meetings with guest presenters, and it's gained a lot of enthusiasm in the community, and it's another way to share plant knowledge. And as they say in Hualapai, hankyu, or thank you.
Thank you to all our panel speakers. And Amanda and I want to share thanks for attending our second annual McKay Seminar Symposium.
And also, from me, thank you to the speakers, the presenters, Rick, Steve, Joe, also Laura Florio, and Quinn up there in the booth, who was taking all my presentations at 1 o'clock in the morning last night. So thank you, Quinn. So enjoy the lunch.
Is it in the cafe?